Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back once again to another episode of Vanilla Minecraft. I'm finally done being ill. For those of you who are unaware, I started work on this video about 3 weeks ago, and right as I was starting it, I got a little bit sick. I then proceeded to be sick for the next 2.5 weeks. Yeah, it's been kind of a bummer, but I think I'm pretty much better now. My throat's still a little iffy, so if I sound a little weird or if I cut myself off at some point, that is why. But for the most part, I think I'm good, and we can get on to some Minecraft stuff. So, what we're actually going to be doing today is starting a new project along the coast of our islands. Nothing too major, it's going to be a relatively quick one. We should be able to finish it today, in fact. But it will hopefully be the first of many projects that we do along the coast of our islands and along the ocean as well. That's something I really want to start doing a lot more of now that we have all of the update aquatic stuff, because, well, looking from the coast of our islands, most of it is pretty bland at the moment. In fact, the only two things that we've done off the coast so far are the mini volcano, which was a very spur-of-the-moment project that was literally done entirely just to cover up the little bit of land that we had over there. And, of course, the cartoony-looking cartoon reef that I started. Now, this project, if you don't recall, was started literally a week before Update Aquatic was announced. Like, I started this under the assumption that we weren't going to have coral blocks and kelp and seagrass and all of that. So, yeah, this project may be changing quite a lot in the near future. In fact, we may even talk about that a little bit later on today, depending on how things go. Maybe at the end of the episode, we'll talk about the future of our coral reef. But, for the time being, let's actually move on and talk about the main project we're going to work on today, which is right over this way, in a spot we've been to before, which is this wall right here. Now, a little while back, we came over to this wall. I cleaned it up kind of briefly. Obviously, I didn't add any real detail to it or anything, but I cleaned it up and put forth an idea of having a hidden boat dock somewhere on the island. Now, that's not what we're actually going to be putting here. I still want to do that project. In fact, I've thought about it quite a bit, and I have a lot of ideas for it, but this spot is not going to work for it. So, I've been thinking for a while about what I wanted to put here. And there's one specific idea that I always knew that I wanted, which is to have a big cave in the side of the wall with the ocean kind of flowing into it. So, like, the bottom of the cave is flooded, and then in the back of the cave we can put something. What's back there isn't really important. The main thing that I wanted was the aesthetic of having a cave in the side of the wall. So, that's honestly kind of the main thing I want to accomplish today, is to get the big cave in place. And I also think I have a good idea for what we can put in the back of it, even if I was a little bit skeptical about doing something like this. But we'll get to that aspect of it once we have the cave. The first step of the process, though, obviously we need to hollow out some space. So, the thing is, like, the best way to do this normally would be to set up a beacon, and of course hollow it out with haste 2 and efficiency. But, well, that's kind of boring, even if it is the most efficient route to go. So what we're going to do instead is use about 7 stacks of TNT, and that should give us a really good, solid start to the process. It may also give us a solid crashing of my server. There we go. I think we're good, as soon as this all updates. I'm surprised that didn't blow through the front more than it did, but okay. And here's what we're working with. Don't mind the mysterious underground trees that were here. So, I think that this is a pretty good starting size to our cave. So, once this is all cleaned up, and the walls are smoothed out a little bit, and we have some stalactites going on, maybe some stuff in the water, and of course something going on in the back, maybe like a muddy shelf or something that we can put something onto. Once we have all of that sorted out, I think this will look pretty cool in here, especially with the whole, like, flooded aesthetic. And, of course, the most important part is getting the front to look cool, because that's the part we're going to be able to see most easily. So, that is the first step of this process, and I'm going to go ahead and get to that. And once I have all of the cave stuff sorted out, like at least at a base level, and we're kind of good to go from there, then I'll talk to you guys about what we're going to put in the back. It's just kind of a goofy little detail build, nothing too impressive. But once I get all the cave stuff figured out, then we'll move on. So I'm going to go ahead and get to all of that, and I'll be back with you guys in just a minute. So here's where we're at so far, and I think this is a solid start. It's still a little rough around the edges, to be sure, especially the area out here in the water. I didn't really want to go too far with the water stuff right now, or the bits in the ocean, mostly because I don't really know how the surrounding areas are going to turn out just yet. So, like, we have our coral reef, for example, that may tie into this area a little bit. We still have to figure out what's going on there. And there's also a build I'm contemplating putting in the ocean over here that may tie into this area as well. And until I do those, I didn't really want to get too far ahead of myself with this. I did want some area to work with, though, because I wanted some of these stones poking out of the water. I would actually like a few more of those as well. But that'll come once we actually start working on the real ocean area over here. For the time being, though, just slapped in a temporary stone floor. So don't worry too much about the bland look down there. We will be fixing it. As for the cliff itself, well, I think it turned out okay for the most part. I actually envisioned it turning out a little more kind of ominous looking, but I think in my head I had a lot more space to work with. This wall actually felt a lot smaller than I thought it was, so I think for the space I actually had to do the whole cave thing with, I think it turned out okay. But it is still a little bit iffy. There's certain things about it that I may be changing. For example, I did experiment with the top edge of it, having the dirt kind of overhanging on the edge a little bit. This is something I normally avoid doing with cliffs. Well, I mean, I shouldn't say I avoid it. I just never thought about it. Where's my boat? There we go. If we go over to some of the other cliffs I've done, you can see if you look up at the edge, the dirt's really flat. It's just sitting on top of the stone. And that looks really boring when you focus on it. Like, it looks really flat. But it's also how cliffs in real life look. They don't have dirt overhanging on the edge normally because, well, the dirt would fall off really quickly. So I don't know which route we should go for that. I also think that maybe I should start trying to work in another material type or two, just to make them look a little more interesting. I mean, we did in the past talk about adding light gray concrete powder, like right here was a little test I did, to kind of look like sediment layers. And I like that idea. Maybe I'd make them a little smoother than I did here. But I don't know for sure. There's also a couple other blocks that work. I think like light gray concrete or light gray concrete powder like this, as well as, I can't remember which color of terracotta, but there's a specific terracotta color that looks okay with stone as well. So maybe I will experiment with those a little bit. Maybe we'll actually do that at some point in the next couple episodes. Set up a bunch of like test cliffs and see what we like. I'm not entirely sure. But that's something to figure out for the future, and I'll go through all of my cliffs and update them once I figure out what I want to do with them. But for right now, this is what the front is going to be looking like, and, well, we'll see what happens in the future. As for the inside of the cave, well, it's pretty standard stuff, a little bit bland. I would like to add a little more detail to it yet. I tried this thing with, like, the leaves only being towards the front, towards the sunlight, and then dropping off in the inside. That probably makes a little more sense than my usual route of just having leaves all over the place, but it does make the top feel a little bland, so maybe I should continue those inwards. I'll think about it. But as for the rest of the cave itself, I think it's okay. Obviously nothing too super detailed or anything, but it doesn't need to be. As I said before, it's mostly the outside that I'm concerned with. And I also put this little bit of dirt in the back. Oh, and underwater is also mostly dirt and then transitions into stone. I thought that made sense, like the ocean kind of brings in dirt and then it gets stuck in here. I think that's kind of cool. But the reason that this dirt is back here is mostly because, well, one, I thought that just having stone and stuff everywhere was a little too bland looking. I also thought that sand might be a little too bright, so dirt was a good middle ground. And I also wanted an area to put a bit of a build back here. So the build that we're going to put back here is nothing, amazing. It's a very, very simple little build. And it's also not very practical. It's not like a farm or anything like that. I did contemplate putting a kelp farm in here, actually, which probably would have been cool, but I think I have a better idea for how I want to do that. What I'm actually going to be putting back here, though, is something that a lot of people have suggested to me over a very long period of time, even longer than this series has existed, in fact. So what we're actually going to be putting back here is something a little bit pirate-themed. Now, that's something a lot of people have suggested to me, and it's something that I've always been kind of against, having pirate stuff here on the islands, mostly because it goes against a lot of the other builds we have. So we have our ancient civilization theme going on, right? And a lot of the builds that we've done with that have things like rare gemstones just built into the wall, the kind of stuff that pirates would definitely pillage if they were around. But I think we can make this work in this one very specific case. I think if we say that the pirates were just kind of going by, they saw what looked to be an uninhabited island, because that is a big point of our island after all, the fact that it looks uninhabited from the outside. So they would go by, see what looks to be an uninhabited island, and a very convenient, very piratey feeling place to hide all of their treasure, and they would decide to use it. They would figure no one lives there, clearly, we're just going to go in, leave our treasure inside the cave, we can come back for it later. I think we can make that work, and it's very contained. It's not really, connected to any of our other projects on the islands. You have to go off the island and around to actually see it. I think that's okay. It'll just be a cool little thing that we know is there, and from time to time we'll pass by and see it from the outside. I kind of like that. So, I think that's the route we're going to go. It is a little iffy, thematically, with the islands, but it should turn out okay. It's just going to be a neat little detail build. Nothing too serious. So, I'm going to go ahead and get to that. I think what I'm going to be doing is building a kind of a shoddy, poorly constructed dock in here. It will have been here for a long time. It's probably been, left to ruin. It's caving into the water and stuff. I think that's the route we're going to go with it, rather than making it look really sturdy and everything. We'll probably make it look really dilapidated, aged, and wearing away. And then, of course, we're going to have a load of pirate treasure all across the back here. And maybe even like a left-behind rowboat that they left in here and is kind of gradually being consumed by the water as well. That might be kind of cool. So, I'm going to go ahead and get to all of that, and, well, we'll see how it turns out. So I have finished our Pirate's Cave, at least for the time being. We may return to it and add some stuff to it later on, and of course we'll be doing a lot more stuff out here in the front once we get to it. But for right now, the cave itself I think is in an okay spot. So I went in here, I did add a little bit more to the general cave itself. I went through and I brought the leaves all the way to the back. The roof was just a little bit too bland without them. I also added in some little water drips and stuff. The usual cave treatment that I like to do, minus floating gravel, unfortunately. It turns out that that is no longer possible, at least as far as I'm aware, because after 1.13, they broke the trick that you could use too tall plants to do it, and I found out it was still possible using sticky pistons, but it turns out with 1.13.1, they removed that. So, as far as I know, we no longer have an in-game way to make floating blocks like that, which is very, very sad. And if you guys know of any legit, vanilla Minecraft survival way to do it, be sure to let me know, because I already missed that trick, and I just figured out I don't have it. Anyway, all of that aside, we have our little pirate's dock back here. I'll try and remember to light this up in post, but I guess I can pull out my torch for the time being. Now, the dock itself is very, very worn down. Maybe a little too much. Maybe I should have made it a little more solid. But I really wanted it to look worn and like it's been here and left to rot for a really long time. So, pretty much half of it's in the water at this point. It's pretty much just a pile of slabs and pressure plates and trapdoors. But I think it gets the points across. I think it works. It's very clicky-clacky as you run over it. But I guess we can say that's the board's creaking as you go across. So I like that. There were a few things that I really wished I could have done with it. Like, for example, why can we not tie a lead to one fence and then another one? It would look so good to have a little rope going across right there, and I can't do it. And it makes me so sad. Same with vines, actually. Because we don't have a way to control vine growth, I never really use them. Because they just go crazy, and you need to spam string everywhere to use them properly. And that's honestly pretty ugly. As much as people say that you can't see them, I notice them all the time in the places on my island that we have vines. And I hate it. So, things like that, man. Just simple things would make my life so much better. Anyway, weeping aside, we have all of the treasure back here. I think that turned out pretty cool. Just little crates of emeralds and gold and, all of that good stuff. Some random items and item frames and armor stands. I do like this trick, though. I was trying to think of a way to convey a pile of gold and gems, and the best that I could come up with was dropping in armor stands and putting gold and diamond helmets on them. Now, I do think this could be done a little bit better. If you're really, really precise with your armor stand placement, you could theoretically put them at slightly different heights, and I think that would help it look more like a mound of stuff, rather than, just crisscrossing planes like this. But either way, I think it's kind of a cool effect. I also did the same thing in a few other spots to look like a little pile of gold, though I probably should have positioned those a little better. They do look a little strange as they are, but I don't know. I think overall it looks okay for what it is. Again, it is just kind of a goofy little side project and not really a significant part of our island, but I don't know. I think for what it is, it's kind of cool. I like it, and, well, I think we're going to leave it like this for the time being. Oh yeah, our boat. I did also make this teeny tiny, really primitive, broken boat, with half of it sunken and kind of laying at the bottom of the ponds. I think that looks okay. Obviously, it's really, really basic, but I couldn't really do much more with it. I wanted it to look really broken apart, with half of it in the water and everything. I also wanted it to be fairly small. I didn't want it to look like a big sailboat or anything. And I think that, trying to do both of those things at once just wasn't really working. I couldn't make it look much more intricate and also breaking apart, or it looked like a big mess. It didn't really look like a boat, it looked like a pile of random blocks. So, without making it a huge scale, obviously. So, I think for what it is, it works. Just a small little rowboat that they brought in here and then left, and it's kind of rotted out over time. I think it works. So, all of that being said, I think we're going to leave this project as it is for the time being. I think it kind of fills the role that it needs to, and obviously the most important spot, or the most important part of it, was just getting this outside to look okay. And I think it does. I think it's good enough for what it is. Obviously, as I said earlier, we will experiment with cliff design a little bit more and maybe come back here and touch it up, as well as fix up this outside part in the ocean once we learn what we're doing in the surrounding areas. But for right now, I think that looks pretty cool. So, I'm going to leave this project as it is for right now, because I do want to take a few minutes to talk about the coral reef. As I said at the beginning of the video, it does feel a little strange, and I want to get your guys' opinion before I make any final decisions on what I'm going to do with it. So, the big problem that we have here is that I made this when, we did not know that real coral reefs were going to be a thing. This was pretty much what I came up with when I wanted to add something underwater, and, well, this was pretty much all I could do. It's the closest thing I could do to an actual coral reef at the time. But it doesn't really match our island, right? Our island is, for the most part, generally pretty realistic. It's not, too out there, for the most part. It's a little fantasy, but not heavily. Whereas this looks like it comes from a cartoon. and it feels a little out of place. As cool as it is, as much as I actually enjoy the project, it just feels strange in this environment. So the alternative to this, now that we have coral blocks and coral fans and kelp and seagrass and all of that stuff, which I don't think it would necessarily mix very well with this setup. I don't think we could have both. But all of that stuff would work a lot better with our island. It would look much more like an actual coral reef, like a more realistic coral reef. So, what I'm thinking of doing, as much as it hurts my heart to say it, is tearing all of this down and building a much more realistic coral reef in its place. I think that for the sake of our island, that would be the best option. It would just look better to have a more realistic coral reef going on out here, and then, you know, we could use the seagrass and kelp and all of that. It would look a lot more lively, is the thing. So that's that step. But it doesn't have to be, you know, half sad. We don't have to completely get rid of these coral designs and this, you know, general style of reef, because we have a place where this would feel good, and that's at our fantasy biome. So, if you're not aware, we have a biome that we've worked on a few times now where we build like 50 block tall flowers and all kinds of crazy stuff like that. Maybe sometime we'll build like giant animals and all kinds of stuff. It's a very cartoony and exaggerated feeling place. And it does, on two sides, border an ocean. So, if we do tear this out from next to our island, which will still hurt me either way, I hate tearing down builds, but if we do that, and then we go and, you know, build a realistic reef in its place, we can rebuild stuff like this over at the fantasy biome off the coast there. So, I think that's the best option. I think that's kind of the best of both worlds, where we end up keeping this style, but we put it somewhere where it makes a little more sense, and we get a more realistic reef next to our actual island. That's where I'm at with this, but I want to hear from you guys, because maybe you don't think that way. Maybe you think that we should keep this project because it's, you know, something we already built and we should preserve the things we've done or something. I don't know, you know, if a lot of you think that way, I'm totally fine with that, because I don't dislike this build, I just don't necessarily think it's the best fit. So, you guys will have to let me know, and I'll go from there. With that, though, well, I think I'm going to go for it today, because, well, we finished up our pirate cave as much as I wanted to, and I also really am far behind on this video and should have had it done weeks ago. Sorry for that. I was not expecting to be ill for multiple weeks. So, with that said, I think I'm going to call it here for today. Hopefully you guys enjoyed our goofy little side project, and hopefully you can tell me what to do with our coral reef project. But, yeah, that'll do it for me for today. So, thank you all for watching. I hope you have an amazing day, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye-bye.